Coming up this episode, take an epic tour of the expansive layout James Street, probably the largest N-Gage layout to have featured in our series. Plus, we launch a layout in a box kit that you can buy, and Phil Parker has all the details on how it's built.
Name's Steve Wright, and the name of the layout is James Street.
Difficult to know where to start with this. It's such a massive project. Let's start with the basics. How big is it?
It's about 20 by 11.
20 feet by 11 feet,
yeah.
With an operating well in the middle.
Yeah.
I see trains everywhere on it. I mean, any idea what length of track work you've got on there?
Not really. There's a 4-track main line, there's a 2-track main line, and there's a single-track line.
All running round.
All running round.
Plus sidings and loops.
Yeah, goods yards.
And goods yards. Okay, let's try the other one. How many trains are there?
You can, obviously, as I said, you can run obviously 4 on the 4-track, 2 on the 2-track, 1 on the single-track. You've got all the goods yards working, doing shunting. Which is the dockyard, and then you've got another goods yard in the terminus station. So all of those will be operating.
So there's no point in me saying how many wagons have you got, Steve, because I bet you wouldn't know.
Yeah, about 500 to 600 plus.
Must make setting it up quite an exercise.
Well, yes, that's why they all come in cassettes. Which you can have railers at the end of the cassettes, and which means you can run them.
So you run a complete train on in one go.
So like you can put a cassette on that line and run it straight onto the 4-track or straight onto the 2-track. And the same in all the sidings. You can set it up so you can run the whole train in. There is also some loading points on the inside which you can put cassettes on, so you can change during the day.
Basically what you're not doing is getting to a show and putting 500 wagons on the track individually.
No. That would take most of the exhibition time.
I think so. Right. I mean, we are firmly in the steam era, but is James Street based on a real location?
No, it's purely fictitious. I mean, it's just based on ideas that I've seen and that I like, and I've used those to create the scenes. So some of it is sort of loosely based on particular areas, but it's not based literally on the area.
Right. So you've invented this. I mean, an amazing triangular station you've got there, which are relatively rare. But of course, you chose to do this in N-Gage, presumably because of space consideration.
Well, yeah. I mean, I originally started N-Gage because I was originally doing TT gauge.
Oh, right, yeah, okay.
And when I came back into doing it, obviously TT had ceased. Well, in
commercial terms.
So
TT.
It was a choice: do I do 4mm or 2mm? And I chose 2mm.
Now, is this a group project? Is there a club, or is it just you?
No, it's just mainly with some assistance from some of the other operators.
And how long has it taken you then? I mean, this is a staggeringly big single-man project.
Well, I started in around 2000, so it's like 19 years coming on.
Even so, 19 years is pretty good going for something of this scale. And what inspired you? I mean, you say you went out of the hobby and then came back in again. There must be some real challenges taking a layout out of this size.
Well, yes. I mean, again, it's we've designed special cassette trolleys that it all slots in, so that you can wheel it about easily and erect it.
Right.
reasonably.
Okay. So you literally wheel it out of the back of the van and set it. Do you have it set up at home?
Oh yes, it's up.
So you've got enough space to set it at home, which allows you presumably to do the debugging and everything like that.
Yeah.
I have to ask, DC or DCC control? DC. So it's pure DC.
Yeah.
And is there a reason for that? I mean, I'm guessing that when you started, DC was the thing, but you've never considered the DCC option?
We did sort of toy with it because I did have an American layout that was DCC, but the problems we could see with the DCC was identifying locos to address. Because of the sheer distance that some of the locos are from the operators, trying to identify those numbers, and because of duplicate stock as well, we felt it would be quite a challenge trying to pass around the numbers from address where they can just select a road, put the power on it, and they know it's going to move.
And I mean, there's the stop. I mean, as we stand here, there is just a constant procession of trains, which is of course the point.
And because it's not just a roundy, you've actually got to take trains around the layout. So they'll be handed over to another operator that will then hand it over to another operator. Passing those numbers around proves quite a challenge.
I bet it does.
So we thought in the end it was easy just to go DC.
And your operating team have been with you for quite some time now, so they're well trained.
They're just about getting the hang of it.
They're getting the hang of this.
Yeah.
The other area I've got to ask about is the dockside, because we don't see many dockside layouts. So certainly as extensive as you've got there, because you've managed to have the width. It's as wide as it is long, which is very unusual in model railway terms. Is that London docks or something?
The idea for that came from actually, believe it or not, Southern. Being this is LMS as well, it was a strange thing. I just saw this, it was Strood one, and I thought that fits very nicely in because Strood was actually on a curve and it fitted into a triangular shape, which was perfect for that area. So it was loosely based on that concept.
But of course, Engage allows you to work with ships of the right sort of size, sensible sort of sizes.
Well, yeah, because if you'd done modern stuff, the ships would be absolutely huge. I mean, those ships are probably sort of 2/3 size or more, but you've got to keep everything in proportion. If you keep the things in proportion, the layout actually then looks bigger.
It's a really impressive project, Steve. Thanks for taking some time to talk us through it. And certainly I'll enjoy. I'm looking forward to seeing it more and more at shows because it's just great watching the trains go by. Well, Howard, welcome to my latest BRM project.
Thank you.
It's called Casket Yard.
Casket Yard?
Casket Yard, because it's a layout that fits in a box.
Aha.
And the idea is that what we've done is we developed this so that you can buy the baseboard and all the bits and a box, and you can build yourself a nice little layout that isn't going to take up a huge amount of space, is going to involve a bit of modelling. It's much more than just a train set.
Yeah.
And at the end of it, you'll end up with a little shunting puzzle that's got loads of operational potential.
Absolutely.
So the baseboard itself is a really easy to assemble laser cut MDF kit. You slot the bits together, you PVA glue them.
Yeah.
Track is next, and that is actually Pico Code 100, which I've laid. The clever bit is that to align it, we've made it really easy. The joint between the 2 points, that's on exactly the line between the two halves of the baseboard, which all bolt together as one. Everything's provided. Yeah. You then ballast it. You build your back scene up. You put the back scene on. You build your background up.
Yeah.
This is cunningly scrap paper underneath here, underneath some mod rock, and then we've flocked it. Put the fencing in place.
You've flocked it.
Well, yes. Yes, I've done all the work as usual, but I was
done
going
a very good job.
Yeah, best of all, there's no soldering to wire it up.
No,
because I've used some pre-assembled Gauge Master fish plates, which come with the wires attached to them. Really, really simple. So, nothing to be scared of. We've kept the points manual or digital in the sense that you poke them with your finger to flick them over, but it would be perfectly possible.
You could take it a step further, couldn't you, with a little kitchen drawer knob type thing and a piece of wire?
Yeah, or you could fit side-mounted point motors on them. If you plan ahead, you can actually put a slot underneath, so you can put underneath mounted point motors. But
it's the same with these uncoupling ramps, really, that you've used on here.
They do the job.
Yeah, or you could do something that was automated if you wanted.
What I've done is made a nice little working layout. Now, it is designed as a shunting puzzle, a classic Inglenook shunting puzzle, as they say, which means the sidings are deliberately the right length for 4 wagons, 3 wagons, 3 wagons, and this will take 5 wagons. So, your challenge, Howard.
Oh, I see where this is going.
You have to do some work now. What I've done is I've printed out pictures of all the wagons.
You've got too much time
on the card. And all you have to do is go into the Hat of Doom.
The Mankey hat. Where's this one come from?
Yeah,
is this your collection?
It's my collection, yes.
Okay.
Take out 4 wagon cards.
Okay. So 1, 2.
Howard has
3.
chosen 2 coal wagons, the container wagon
And the
and
top-
the
5
tarpaulin top wagon.
Okay.
And all you have to do now is shunt the train to produce that train of wagons
In that specific order?
specific order. Yes.
Okay.
Now there are several 100,000 combinations of wagons here.
Okay, then off we go. And through the magic of the edit,
Here we are. Howard has finished.
Howard has finished, although he's left one wagon behind.
He's left one wagon behind,
Well,
but
that's okay.
we'll
You
let
get the
him. We'll
idea.
let him off.
Get the
And so
idea.
it's a good, fun little project, though, isn't it?
Well, I can see there's plenty of operational, interest in it, with 2 points there, but there's one thing that's worth pointing out. There's plenty of room at the front to add the odd road vehicle or maybe a few extra buildings.
I think that's what I'll do next then. As Howard said, this layout could really do with a few more buildings on the front of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at a few things I can do to enhance the basic model. And the first thing I'm going to build is a provender store. Now provender stores turn up all over the country in all sorts of goods yards. So even if you're not building this layout, this sort of provender store is ideal for any sort of late steam era, early diesel era yard. The building, which is I'm building from a ratio kit, is interesting because it's actually modular. The real things are modular. So you can build it as big as you like, or in my case, as small as I like, because I actually need it slightly smaller than the full kit to fit in the space. It's quite a lot of bits in a very tightly packed plastic bag. Throw that away, won't be needing that. And as you can see, I've got lots and lots of bits to assemble. The sides are these concrete panels and they're joined up with these various concrete struts. I say concrete, they're made of plastic and they're sort of self-coloured. There's some roof panels, some doors and guttering and that sort of thing, bits to support it, and these important legs, because provender stores were pushed up on the ground so that you didn't, because you'd put animal feed and that sort of thing in front of them, and you wanted them reasonably vermin proof. This is all a good thing. There's also some card bits for the inside, I'll talk about those later, and of course some instructions. Right, now the instructions just show you just how complicated this kit can be. It's actually not a difficult kit to build if you take it carefully, but it is fairly time consuming. So as there already are instructions provided with the kit, I'm not going to show you every single step of the way, partly because I have had a go at this kit and I know it takes about 3 to 5 hours. You're looking at probably a pleasant week's worth of evenings to assemble this, and you've got a really nice, attractive, interesting building for your layout. Right, what I will do is I'll give you a few pointers to building the kit, and I think a lot of these are applicable to any kit. You're not going to need a huge amount of tools, for example. One sharp knife is the main tool. I've got a Swan Morton scalpel here, which slides back into its handle because I like the chunky handle, and more importantly, it means I can slide the blade away and don't cut myself. For getting stuff off the sprues, I've got an old pair of snips. Not essential, but they do make life a bit easier. You'll need some glues. I like to use a pointy nose plastic cement for a lot of the assembly, and then most importantly, liquid solvent as well to finally fix things together, and a ruler. A ruler is very, very important to this kit, and I will explain why. First of all, I'm going to just nip these off. For the big bits where you've got straight lines to work with, it's quite easy to whip a knife through them. There we are. Although this kit has been around for quite some time, it's nicely moulded. There's very little flash on any of the parts, so there isn't a lot to clean up. The most important thing is to pay attention when you're building the sides, because essentially every panel is joined by one of these, and a lot of them all look the same. So they're quite nicely marked on the sprue. They're all letters. So if I look at the first set of panels, 2 of them are joined together by part D. And if I look on there, there is part D. Cut it off and just trim the end. Little bit of plastic glue down the side and put it onto assemble it onto the side. It does say in the instructions that the higher bit on each one of these should be at the top. Moving on, do the next one. A little bit of plastic glue there. Don't need very much of this. Try and be very, very sparing because, well, there's no point in wasting it, and also it stops glue splurging out. Now, this is where the ruler is really important. All the bottom of these need to be nice and in line, and therefore if you just keep pushing it up against a ruler, you should ensure that the whole building, which could very easily be built sort of wonky and banana shaped, will be nice and straight. And I'll just do one more panel, and in this case I now want part A, which again clearly marked. Don't, as with most plastic kits, don't take all the bits off in one go. You'll only lose them or get all confused. And again, a little bit of plastic glue there. Always keep the nozzle bit pointing upwards, and generally on these sort of things they don't bung up. If they do bung up, just have a piece of very fine wire and poke it down the nozzle, and you'll find it'll clean the glue out quite nicely. Okay, slide the two together, again using the ruler just to line them up, and I should be confident that as I work along, everything will glue nicely. I'm just going to take a little bit of plastic solvent now, run it into the joint. Keep your fingers away from this because it softens the plastic, and it's really easy if you touch it to put a fingerprint into the side of your building. The wall is starting to come together. Now there's another couple of panels to go into this. There's a top, there's more ends, all sorts of bits there. So I say it is quite time consuming, but take it slowly and you shouldn't have any real problems. The kit, as I say, is nice and clean, but there are a couple of areas where it's just worth having a quick look and tidying them up. There are these fatter pillars here, I should say, and because of the way these parts are moulded, and it's a two-part mould with the moulds coming together like that, you do get a little line along the front edge. Now, you can sand this to clean the line off, but I prefer a technique I picked up from military modelers, which is simply to scrape along the part there, and you can see you suddenly get, it's probably not going to show up very much on the camera, but the very fine mould line disappears really, really easily, and you'll find very controllable. You get little bits of swarf on the knife blade. Absolutely perfect parts, ready for assembly onto the rest of the kit. Now, one of the things about this kit is it is not all plastic. Push the plastic bits to one side. There's also some card interior parts. Now the instructions say you should colour these in with a felt tip pen. It'll work, but to be honest, the kit is really rather nice. So I wanted to paint these, but of course if you paint them, because they're just printed, all the details can disappear. Now you could make replacements, but there's nothing wrong with cardboard as a material. All I want is a little bit of relief, and to sort that out, I've got a scribing tool here. It's a little blunt scriber. You could use the end of a knitting needle. You could even use a blunt knife. I've seen that done before. This little scribing tool is fairly readily available from Model Rower Traders. I think this one came from Freestone Model Accessories, but it's readily available. Little ball on the end. I think there are all sorts of ways of doing this. You don't want anything sharp because you don't want to cut through the card, but just scribing along the lines, suddenly my cardboard has got a bit of relief in it. You can now see the plank lines. If you rub your finger over them, you can actually feel the plank lines, so that once you've finished that, you can paint it and it will look exactly the same as all the plastic parts. You'll have actually a little bit of relief there. You can cut it out and there's your floor ready to plonk into the centre of the building. Phil's final handy hint for building plastic kits like this comes when you look at glazing. There is a little window in the kit that fits in the outside wall, and the instructions say to cut a bit of scrap plastic to stick behind it, and that will do the glazing. The trouble with that is it means you end up really, really deep frames. If you look at a proper window frame, you'll actually find there's very little between the front of the frame and the glass. Now, You could carefully cut each one of these panes out in plastic, and that would take you ages, and you'd need to do a really neat job for it to look effective. Far easier. One of these, I'm using glue and glaze here, or crystal clear. One of these liquid glazing materials, again, very useful for all sorts of kits. Just, in fact, I'm going to use the corner of the cardboard here, squirt a little bit out onto either a plastic or a card surface, basically somewhere you can throw it away. Poke a small screwdriver or a cocktail stick into there, run it round the inside of the hole, and once you run it round once, just build up enough material in there to form a skin across the whole window. And this varies a little bit depending on how big the windows are, but what it'll do is it will dry absolutely clear. This is actually I understand that, a little bit more there, this is actually a sort of high quality PVA, and will dry perfectly clear, or at least clear enough for a window in the side of a good shed. There we are, I've filled all 3 of those very quickly. Now, I'll leave it to dry, I'll leave it horizontally because it is a liquid, and it will drain to the bottom if you hold it that way. If you prop it up that way, it will gradually work its way to the edge, which means you end up with windows that are thicker on one side than the other. Leave it to dry horizontally, and it'll fill the window. You'll get something that's very nearly flush, and it'll look really quite nice on the model. It's a sort of detail that you don't really notice until it's wrong, and then you look at that and think, that's a bit deep. But again, technique that you can use on all sorts of plastic kits. So there we are, a few pointers. At this point, I now go all Blue Peter on you and say, here's one I made earlier. And I will say, there is about a week's worth of evenings in just this little kit. But what I've done is I've built it. You can see the walls are made up of the panels, as I was showing you earlier. There is a roof panel, and what I've done is I've sneakily made it 1 panel shorter across the front because I don't have quite enough width on the layout to install it full size. You can, because these are prefabricated buildings in real life, you can actually extend this with extra kits. So the instructions certainly show a 2-kit version, which would be considerably larger and big and more appropriate for larger stations, but bigger still. And these things still exist, so you can actually go out and have a look at them. However, there it is. I've got my building. I have painted it. It is self-coloured plastic, admittedly, but I've painted it with Precision Paints concrete colours because I just prefer the look of the painted version. All I've got to do now is install it on the layout. Now I've built my building, what I need to do is I need to install it on the layout, and I'm going to put it here, right at the end. A couple of reasons for that. Leaves most of the yard free. I can back a lorry up to it, but also it acts as a handy view blocker because then you can't see the edge of the baseboard from the front. Now, I've deliberately built, as I said, I've deliberately built the building a little bit short so it fits in the gap here and not too close to the track, because I don't really want the locomotives and the rolling stock whacking it as they go by. Installing a building really is like this. It's really simple. The first things first. Just check the legs are all vertical. There's an awful lot of legs underneath here, and it's very easy to build them so that they're just leaning over slightly. It's only a case just pulling them back vertical again, but you will notice it when you've installed it on the layout if you've got it wrong. A little bit of PVA on the bottom of each foot. Don't put gallons of it on, but don't worry if it squeezes out around the edges, because that is actually a good thing in this instance. Place it carefully on the layout, and if it's not sitting down properly, sometimes what I do is I lean, and I literally mean lean, a hammer against the top, just or something with a bit of weight in it, just to push it down properly into the ground. And then the finishing touch, and this is why it doesn't matter if a little bit of glue squeeges out the side, is to take your grass puffer bottle with whatever colour of grass you're using on the layout, and just puff a little bit around the bottom of the building, and that will stick onto the PVA, and you'll just get a little bit of bedding in process. Just blow the excess off, and you can see where the glue's splodged, the grass is stuck, and that'll look nice and neat. However, purpose-built buildings weren't the only thing you'd find in yards. And another one we think would look nice on this is a grounded van body. This is again from a ratio kit, and really simple kit to build. You've literally got 4 sides and a roof, and then some piles of sleepers to put underneath, because these things will be propped up off the ground. And I'm just going to put that in beside the shunter's bothy. Again, it's these things turn up all over the place because the railways had all sorts of leftover rolling stock, and if you've got a leftover van or a van that's no longer in use, well, if you need a shed, why not just take the van and plonk it on the ground? You also got an awful lot of farmers buying these things as sheds. So these you'll still see these in fields all over the country. And there we are, plonked it down, a little bit of PVA. Once that's stuck in place, then you can see that the yard is starting to fill up quite nicely. I don't want to put too much in the yard because they wouldn't be that crowded, but a couple of extra buildings just gives the layout a bit more character. However, it's now time to move on, because the other thing that would give it a bit more character is a little bit of weathering. So that's the next job I'll tackle. Now, the ballast on this layout has been freshly applied, and to be brutally honest, it's really nice and neat, but it's far too clean for real life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at doing a bit of weathering. I've taken an old bit of plywood which has warped quite badly, stuck a bit of track to it, ballasted it with the same material that I've used on the layout. And this is just an off-cutter track I just happen to have kicking around. And then I've done a little bit of experimenting with weathering powders, which I quite like, and various grades of greenery, and a couple of different methods of applying them. First thing I'm going to do is get a bit of dirt into the track, and I'm going to do that with some brown weathering powder. Now, any brown weathering powder will do the job. It's a fairly mucky job, but any brown weathering powder will certainly do this. You can use all sorts of paints and washes, but I find weathering powder works surprisingly effectively. Brush it into the track. The ballast will grip hold of this really nicely. You notice I'm giving the buffer stop a good dose of it as well. I'm a big fan of basically everything on the railways at some point goes brown, a mucky brown colour. So use quite a lot of the brown weathering powders, and I'm applying it with a fairly stiff brush. This is one of the Humbrol stipple brushes that they provide. They're quite a nice cheap brush, but they are very stiff, which makes it really ideal for getting this powder right into the stones. And this isn't a clean job, just get the stuff absolutely everywhere. Once I've done a bit with the little brush, I break out a big brush and work it around the layout that way. This stuff will spray quite nicely. Big brush makes it easier to move around, and you can see the end of this yard is already looking nice and grubby. Certainly more realistic than the beautifully clean ballast I'd put in before. You may find if you're doing a diesel era layout, you want to put a bit of black into it where the diesel locomotives have stood. This is a steam era layout, so you don't get those sort of oil spills going on. Okay, there we have it, a bit of dirt. Now, I think what I'd also like is a little bit of overgrown track work at the end. Now, this happens on branch lines, ends of sidings, basically anywhere that nobody's looking after the track too much. And it's quite an attractive feature because it gives you some colour in amongst all the brownness. And for that, all I'm going to be using is I'm going to have my puffer bottle out, and I'm going to use some electrostatic grass. Again, a bit slightly messy job this, but not putting mountains of it in. And I have got some other leftover fibres in there from a previous project, but this sort of mid-green works really well, and about 2 mil is ideal because I'm going to put it between the rails as well as around them, and it just means that there's less chance of anything getting up into the mechanisms of the locos as they drive over it. PVA glue works really well for this. Just sort of splodge it around the track. I'm going to give that a good squeeze. Don't want masses of it around, because we're not looking to cover the stuff. This isn't completely overgrown. It's just weeds and muck around the track. Poke it around with your finger just to get the glue spread a bit. You're looking ideally for a lot between the rails and not too much on top of the sleepers, because grass doesn't generally grow too well on top of sleepers. I'm just going to let it get a bit tacky, because the puffer grass just tends to work better if it's working on tacky glue. So give it a few moments under the light. You will need to wash your hands after this one. It's quite a messy job, but seeing it work often is messy, and that's part of the fun as far as I'm concerned. Okay, there we are. Got some glue on there. Puff the stuff all over the place. Having puffed it all on, we're now going to suck a lot of it off with a vacuum cleaner. But because I'm quite stingy, I'm going to put a handkerchief over the end of my vacuum cleaner nozzle, so I can collect the grass that I have just puffed all over the place and reuse it again, because it can go straight back into the bottle. Another benefit of using the vacuum cleaner is that it will make the grass stand up a little bit more, so that because you do want your grass standing up as though it's growing, not lying down like some sort of weird weed. As you can see, it's a pretty mucky job. You are going to need to put this. This is going to need to go back into the washing machine afterwards. But there we have it. Very quickly, the ends of the sidings are now looking nice and overgrown. If you get a little bit somewhere you don't want it, just rub it whilst the glue is a little dry. Sorry, a little tacky, and the grass will come straight off. So I can take it off the metal bits where it wouldn't. There we are. Look at that. Instant overgrown siding. I'm only going to do little bits of that on the rest of the layout, because obviously the whole siding wouldn't be overgrown, but the bits at the ends do tend to get a little bit weedier. Nice, very simple effect. Having spent a bit of time doing a little bit of scenery, I think a nice finishing touch for the layout would be some trees. You can buy ready to plant trees, and to be honest, there's a lot of really good ones out there. But I like making things, and a really cheap way of doing trees is to buy a kit for them. And so I'm using a Woodland Scenics kit, which contains some greenery, some clumpy greenery, and some tree amateurs. These are made of plastic. There's some more bits of tree in the end there, but we'll ignore those for the moment. These are made of plastic, and as you can see, are completely flat and not awfully tree shaped. However, they're really quite simple to use, and it's quite ingenious. First things first, there is a base supplied for the tree. You won't need that. Trees don't grow out of lumps of plastic in the ground. What they do is they grow out of the ground. So there's a little spike we'll be able to plant the tree later. Now this flat plastic thing has, weirdly, got to be bent to shape. Now I've never been convinced that this ought to work. It's plastic, surely it should just break when you start bending it around. But amazingly, you can see that it does seem to survive the bending. And you can twist the trunk so that you get different shapes. And I usually like to make sure the prongs, the branches sort of lie flattish, because if you look at a real tree, that tends to be how they look. And I like to put a bit of a droop in them as well, because again, that tends to be how real trees actually work. And you can sit and bend this for surprising amounts of time without apparently breaking anything. You could just clip, if there's too many branches on, you could clip them off easily enough so that you can have the tree you want. And that'll do for the minute, because the next stage is to give it a bit of foliage. So there we are, we've got a tree. A bit more twist in the trunk there to give it a bit more of a 3D effect. And there we have our basic set of tree branches. You can see that was quite nice and quick. And then what we have to do is cover them with this clumpy foliage stuff. As you can see, it's actually quite big clumps, but you can tease them out if you want. I'm not going to worry too much though. The instructions suggest that what you're going to do is you're going to plonk this tree in the bag and shake it around a bit, and it's going to come out. The trouble is, once you've extended your tree and bent it to shape, it won't go in the bag anymore. I've done a bit of experimenting, and I think I've got an alternative solution for that. First of all, cover your tree in glue where you want the clumpy foliage to be. Now, PVA glue will work, but I'm actually using Deluxe Materials Speed Bond because it does what it says on the outside of the pot. It sticks all sorts of things and it dries quite quickly, which for the work I'm doing here, when I'm sitting there and you're watching me and wanting me to get a move on, is quite important. But actually, perfectly normally PVA will work. You just need to let the stuff dry a bit longer. And you can see I am liberally and generously coating all the branches with this, but I'm not going all the way back on the branches. What I'm doing is I'm just doing the ends of them, so you'll still be able to see the branches themselves. I don't want a lump of tree. I actually want a tree that you can see through. So again, you look at real trees, they're not generally a sort of mass of greenery. What they are is sort of greenery on the ends of the branches. Right, and what I do is just make a mess, and I sort of lie the tree on the table and push my clumpy scenic stuff into it, and hopefully I can gradually persuade it to stick to the branches. Sometimes you can actually spear the end of a clump with the ends of the branches, and if I think I need a bit more, I shall just put a bit more glue on there. And eventually what I end up with is a green mass sat on the table. However, this is all very green, and to be honest, it's all a sort of bluey green, and it doesn't really match the layout. So I'll push that to one side and I'll stick some more back on later. So what I've got is one I did earlier. Now you can see the tree has stuck and the clump stuck, and what I'm going to do is I want to blend it in with the rest of the layout. Now on the rest of the layout I've used this sort of mid-green flock, and I'll use a bit of that on the tree itself. Now I've been down to Howard's makeup cabinet and stolen a bit of hairspray. Spray the tree with that and just a little sprinkle of the mid-green on there, and it'll start to blend with the rest of the layout. And that's quite important because you don't want lots of clashing colours on a layout. You want a nice harmonious look, and that will look a whole lot more natural. And there we are. That hairspray will actually, because it's ultra hold, which is important for Howard's hairstyle, it will hold the flock powder, and it's just perfectly normal flock powder on this tree quite happily for many years to come. So all I've got to do now is plant it on the layout. Last job on the layout for today is to plant my tree. Now, this is a very special tree because if you look, I've bent all the branches forward, so it's got a completely flat back. And the reason for that is I want to plant it here, just where the gap in the back, the join between the two parts of the back seam is, because I want to hide that join as effectively as possible. So it's going to go right at the back of the layout, right up hard against the back seam. Simple enough. This is, as you read, this is mod rock or plaster bandage, and all I do is I just poke a hole in the surface with a screwdriver, and then I'm going to put a bit of trusty PVA onto the bottom of the tree, and just plenty PVA on the bottom of the tree. I'm also going to cheat and put some on the back of the tree because I'm going to stick it to the back seam. There we are, a bit of PVA on both sides. Carefully now poke into the hole I've created. Actually, I've poked that in the, could have done to move that back a bit. No problem. Scenery is surprisingly adaptable. I'm going to poke another hole in there, and I'll cover up my mistake with a bit of flock powder later on today. A bit more glue. and that goes against the back of the layout. I'm just going to prop it in position while the glue dries with the puffer bottle. Lean that against it, a little bit of weight there. And there we have it. Once that glue's dried, then that tree will be sitting there. It gives me a nice bit of useful height at the back of the layout and also covers up the join in the back seam. I'll probably put a couple more trees in. I've got some left in the pack. I'll probably put a couple more trees in just to build a little clump there, and it will finish off the layout. So there we have it. A few little additions to the layout, stuff that you can do on any layout that you're working on. Doesn't have to be that one, this one here, but you know, trees, buildings, bit of track weathering, all useful techniques and all simple jobs. And the great thing about it is, once you've done them, you get to see a bit of progress on your layout. And we all like to see a bit of progress because it keeps the hobby alive for us. Oh yeah, hope this has helped you, and happy modelling.
If you want to make your own layout in a box like Phil, buy all the kit you need as shown here and in this issue of BRM from our online web store. Visit worldofrailways.co.uk/store and buy all the goods that you need in one click, delivered to your home address. Until next month, happy modelling.